I'm not taking my sneakers off. I am Sneakers O2.
Hey, take those sneakers off!
No!
Take them off, I said!
No! Ah, let him go. We'll never catch him. Not with our small driving wheels. I didn't take my sneakers off. I'm still Sneakers O2. The London and South Western Railway O2 was a class of 044 tank engines. 60 examples were built at 9 Elms between 1889 and 1895, having been designed by William Adams to replace the Centaur class 240s. The O2s were small engines, yet still powerful for their size, and the design included a lever reverser, roomy cab, and other mod cons typical of the Adams era. They may have been intended to replace the BT well tanks and small-wheeled 240s, but after they proved themselves with their performance, they started covering for T1 class 044s, not to be confused with the Pennsylvania Railroad T1, and Adams radial tank 442s when those engines were out for routine maintenance. Thinking back to the LSWR T1, I had never heard of those engines until very recently. The O2s did well enough to the point where they would be used on outer suburban services instead of the Adams radial tanks. Meanwhile, other O2s could be found allocated to sheds in the West Country, more specifically Chard, Seaton, Sidmouth, Exmouth, and Oakhampton. Incidentally, that last one is a place to which I happen to have paid a visit in real life. The station may be a far cry from what it used to be, but at least it's got regular train services to Exeter again. In 1895, the same year in which the last O2s were built, Dugald Drummond replaced William Adams as the LSWR's chief mechanical engineer. During this era, the O2s would receive coal rails on the bunker, and some of them were fitted with Drummond-style chimneys, which, to be honest, I kind of prefer over the original Adams chimneys. The O2s would be displaced to other duties following the arrival of Drummond's own M7 class 044 tanks, which resulted in the T1 and Adams radial tank classes being displaced to those duties previously occupied by O2s. Starting in 1907, a pair of O2s were sent to the Lyme Regis branch after attempts at using former LBSCR A1 Terriers proved unsuccessful. For context, this branch line had gradients as steep as 1 in 40, and severe curvature that caused excessive tyre wear and could even twist an engine's frames. As it turned out, the O2s had trouble on this line too, and from 1913 they were replaced by 125 and 520, a pair of Adams radial tanks. Of course, 125 and 520 would later be joined by 488, and the rest is history. Thinking back to the O2s, 2 of them were modified for push-pull work in 1914 and sent to run on the Seaton branch, where they proved equally successful as the larger and more powerful Adams radial tanks, T1s and M7s. All the O2s lasted into Southern Railway ownership upon the grouping in 1923, but the Southern Railway had plans for more electrification in the London area. That, coupled with some of the M7s and T1s being cascaded to country service, would have resulted in 20 O2s being made redundant, had there not been a demand for small yet powerful tank engines on the Isle of Wight. Starting in 1923 with locomotives 206 and 211, later W19 Osborne and W20 Shanklin respectively, 23 O2s would end up being transferred to the island. For these duties, they were given Westinghouse air brake equipment, as all trains on the island were fitted with air brakes. In 1932, locomotive W19 Osborne was fitted with an extended bunker, which later became the standard for all O2s on the Isle of Wight, while their classmates that remained on the mainland retained the original bunker design for the rest of their lives. The first O2s were withdrawn in 1933, but 48 of them survived into British Railways ownership upon nationalisation in 1948. By the time the 1950s came around, most of the O2s left on the mainland were only used on trip workings or station pilot duties, while the aforementioned M7s continued on branch line services. The last mainland O2, number 30225, was withdrawn in 1962, while the Isle of Wight engines outlasted their mainland counterparts by 5 years. Regular steam operations on the Isle of Wight ended on the 31st of December 1966, but a pair of O2s, namely W24 Calbourne and W31 Chale, survived into 1967 for engineering trains. Beyond 1966, the only section of the island's railway system that survived in British rail operation was the 8.5 miles from Ryde Pierhead to Shanklin. This section was electrified and received former London Underground standard stock trains, classified as Class 485 and Class 486, and these were later replaced by former 1938 stock, which was reclassified as Class 483. These days, the Ryde to Shanklin line is still open, and since 2021, they have been using former D78 stock, now rebuilt and redesignated as Class 484, so the island is maintaining the tradition of using hand-me-down former London Underground units. As for the O2 tank engines, there was an attempt to preserve W31 Chale, but sadly, this was unsuccessful. However, her sister engine, W24 Calbourne, was more fortunate, and is still around today on the Isle of Wight Steam Railway, which runs from Smallbrook Junction to Wootton. Calbourne is now the sole survivor of her class. The LSWR O2 was brought to Train Simulator by Caledonia Works, and released on the 1st of August 2026, although that appeared as the second for me due to time zone differences. The add-on is available on CW's website for £20, or $47.92 NZD at full price. As for how to install the pack, it's supplied in a .exe installer file, so once you've extracted that from the initial zipped file, you just need to make sure that the add-on is set to install in your Railworks file directory, so there's no faffing about with TS Utilities or 7-zip, however you prefer to extract content from .rwp files. Much like the Great Western Saint and Great Eastern Y14, which I've looked at in previous videos, the O2 is another pack with a large amount of variation, and we'll start by going through the livery selection for the mainland variants, which is as follows. LSWR Adams Green, which reminds me of the A12 class 042s, LSWR Drummond Green, LSWR Uri Transitional Green, Standard LSWR Uri Green, SR Transitional Uri Green, 1923 to 1925, 3 variants of Standard SR Maunsell Green, labelled as 1925 to 1930, 1930 to 1931, and 1931 to 1938, SR 1939, an odd variant with yellow lining instead of white, SR Maunsell Unlined Green, 1939 to 1941, SR Unlined Malachite Green, 1940, SR Wartime Black, 1941 to 1948, BR Transitional Black, 1948, BR Unlined Black, and BR Lined Black. For the sake of making the pack easier for me to wrap my head around, I decided to go over the Isle of Wight variants separately from the mainland variants. The IOW livery selection is as follows: LSWR Uri Green, 4 variants of SR Maunsell Green, labelled as 1924 to 1925, 1925 to 1930, 1930 to 1931, and 1932 to 1939. SR Unlined Maunsell Green, 1939 to 1941. SR Wartime Black, 1941 to 1945. SR Lined Malachite Green, 1945 to 1948. Malachite with Transitional British Railways lettering, 1948. BR Lined Black. BR Unlined Black. And 2 preservation variants for W24 Calbourne. Personally, my favourite livery in the pack is the Southern Malachite Green, not just because I like that livery in general, but also because it's what W24 Calbourne was wearing when I saw her at Smallbrook Junction in May 2025. Meanwhile, the BR Black variants, both lined and unlined, have the same setup as BR Black liveries in multiple previous add-ons from CW, in the sense that they are scripted to show 4 different decal options, rather than having separate liveries for each decal. Apparently, there were numerous variants of BR Lined Black on these engines in working days, but Mr. Wilson only included one because he was going for an overall representation of the O2s, rather than going down the rabbit hole of individual variations for each locomotive. It's worth mentioning that his O2s include 3D number plates and nameplates where applicable. I always like to see 3D plates, and I wish Armstrong Powerhouse would be more consistent with implementing that sort of thing on their own packs. Looking at you, Class 47. There are some customization options on the CW O2s, although the amount of customization depends on which variant you choose. In the case of the original mainland Adams Green variant, you can change the tank decals, while the mainland Drummond Green variant has 4 tank decal options and 2 different chimney types. You can change the whistle type on the Isle of Wight variants, and apparently, some O2s on the island never got the hooter whistle. As for the in-game sound set on the O2, this was supplied by Ash of Vulcan Productions, as opposed to Vulcan Railcars, and mostly recorded from the real W24 Calbourne. Before moving on to the list of features aboard CW's O2, I wanted to try recreating one of the video clips I shot at Smallbrook Junction in real life. The O2s make use of SimNation's Locomotion 2.0 scripting, and include the latest features that have been standard on CW products since 2023. I have no idea what 4449 and a crab are doing here at Haven Street. Anyway, the O2's list of features includes, but is not limited to, scripted water tank filler caps, opened with Ctrl-T and closed with Ctrl-Shift-T, adjustable safety valve and air pump audio, lowered with shift comma and raised with comma, scripted air brakes where applicable, realistic adhesion physics with dynamic wheel slip scripting, realistic regulator and steam chest simulation, fire intensity synchronized with the exhaust beat, as opposed to the sugar beat, a customizable lamp or disc arrangement at both ends of the locomotive, controlled with Control 1 through to Control 4 up front, then Control Shift 1 through Control Shift 4 at the back, with appropriate lamps or discs depending on the variant. A realistic fully functional cab, numerous cab camera views, a 3D firebox, Performance Mode Pro, which is toggled with Shift P, and the option to choose between advanced and simple driving modes by pressing Ctrl A. Simple mode makes the locomotive a little bit easier to drive by disabling the steam chest simulation and reverser lock. Speaking of the reverser, I thought that this thing feels a little bit heavy, in the sense that it takes 15 seconds to shift from full forward to full reverse gear. On the O2, you can open the roof vent, cab side doors, and porthole windows at both ends of the cab. At present, we haven't got a modern, highly detailed version of the Isle of Wight network, on par with GAD's West of England mainline, in the game. In saying that, I could have sworn I saw that Steam Sound Supreme have got one in the works, but A, it hasn't been released yet, and B, it appears to just be the heritage line rather than the full network as it was back in the O2's heyday. In any case, and for parts of this video, I've been using the old RSC era Isle of Wight route, made in 2011, which is now looking rather outdated by today's standards. And now for that traditional part of a CW review where I see just how fast a given locomotive can go. In this case, I was running on Dovetail's North Wales coastal route with W14 Fishbourne and some Stroudley coaches. Those are the Stroudleys from Golden Age Developments, if anyone's curious. I initially reversed down the branch from Llandudno to Llandudno Junction, then went balls to the wall on the main line to Holyhead, but only went as far as that station with a stupidly long name. As for how the locomotive performed on this test run from Llandudno Junction to Llanfairpwll, I am not saying the rest of that name, I got her up to an absolute top speed of a staggering 73 miles per hour. I can only imagine how the ride quality on the Stroudley coaches would be at that sort of speed in real life. By the time I got to the station with that stupidly long name, I had used up well over half of the locomotive's water capacity, which is only 800 gallons. According to the manual, the O2's ideal fire mass is between 755 and 765 pounds for normal running, or between 700 and 710 pounds for casual shunting. It's a good idea to keep an eye on the fire mass and top it up frequently, as this engine has more of an appetite than I was expecting, even when she's not working hard. I have no idea why I decided to run an LSWR locomotive in North Wales, but what I do know is that I'm a bit disappointed in the current absence from TS Classic of Class 197 Civity DMUs. This thing would be quite useful on the North Wales coastal route. Some people may be turned off by the price of the LSWR O2 and other CW packs, but I would argue that you at least get what you pay for, and I mean that as a compliment to Chris and the work he and his team have done. All things considered, this little 044 tank is perhaps on par with the GWR Saint, LSWR E2, Great Eastern Y65, and Midland Railway Licky Banker as one of my favourite CW releases of 2026 so far. Hopefully this video can help you make an informed choice on whether or not you'll pick up the O2 for yourself, and as for where I'd rate this add-on, I reckon she deserves 8.3 out of 10.